good afternoon, and we want to welcome you to another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And we've set this show up because this is a question we often get. I'll get a phone call, and it'll be a service company, and they'll say, "Hey, we're getting ready to go. We're thinking about opening up a showroom." So I get this question a lot, and today I wanted to bring in a guest, and I've got a young man on here today that has a very successful chimney service business and a fireplace retail offering. And he also has fabrication capabilities and is a manufacturer. So he's really an entrepreneur. But we're going to talk to him today about the difficulties of operating all three of these types of operations. Cheryl, what would you say about today's episode and the value of what we're getting ready to talk about?
Well, the value from my concept is the fact that it's hard to run one business. And even though all three of these belong to the same gentleman, he is mastering and making a good run at doing all three of them. Very few people can do that and become totally successful. So I hope today we can find out some of those long lost secrets.
Yeah. And like I said, he reminds me a whole lot of me because very similar to what he's doing was what we did. We had a service business, we had a retail business, and then we went into the fabrication building business, which is Cheryl's business today, IBD Outdoor Rooms. So stick around with us. We're going to be right back, and we'll have our guest on live, and we'll have some really good discussion today. And we appreciate you being with us as always. So we're back again, and I'm going to slide our guest right over here where he's in the big screen, and Cheryl and I are in the small screen. So this is our guest today. His name is Brion Barnhill, and he operates Barnhill Chimney, and we're going to get into what all he does here today in this show to go forward. So anyway, Brion, good to have you with us today. I appreciate you taking some time because I know you're busy in the middle of November like this. Would that be correct?
That's right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, it's really an honor, Brion. You know, I've heard you speak sometimes and really learned a lot about you. I've known you for years. But so people know, let's do a little bit about your background. What did you do before you got into the chimney industry? Or did you start this right out of high school? What was your deal?
So right out of high school, the summer after high school, I got a call from my brother, David Fireball Barnhill III. And he was working for a chimney company in Atlanta, Georgia called the Mad Hatter. And he was a suite tech for them. And he said, "Hey, I'd love you to come down and ride on a truck with me. I've got this gig working for a chimney company." And I said, "Man, that sounds great." Well, I got down there and they didn't need me in the field. So I ended up working, answering telemarketing or doing telemarketing for them. I made it 3 days, Jerry.
Really? Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Mad Hatter. They're actually in Alpharetta, Georgia, if I'm correct.
That's right.
They were in Alpharetta there.
Yep. So I went down there and I worked. I made it 3 days on the line as a telemarketer. The big takeaway from my telemarketing days was that the first day at 18, I sounded like a baby on the phone, and I got yelled at so much, and it just bruised my ego so bad. And then day two, I thought, I don't have to be me. They don't know who I am. And there was another guy on the line. His name was Bob. And Bob sounded like the Vlasic pickle guy. "Hi, this is Bob with the Mad Hatter." And he closed so many deals over the phone reading that script. I'm like, I'm just going to be Bob. I don't have to be me. And then if I get shut down, it doesn't have to hurt my ego. So day two, I'm Bob. I start closing jobs. I'm like, "Hi, this is Brion with the Mad Hatter." Day three, I'm closing jobs. I'm like, "Hey, this is like my first gig out of high school. I'm doing pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about myself." And Bob, end of day three with his cane, and Bob was probably 78 years old. He comes by and he grabs me with this Vulcan death grip behind my neck here. And he leans in and he says, "Hey, kid, that's my thing." And it was terrifying. And so then the owner came to me and he said, Brian, listen, I don't know what happened. And you were really starting to do pretty good, but you pissed off Bob. And he's our top closer. So this just isn't going to work out. And I was like, golly. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm down here in Atlanta. I guess, I'll try to go back home to Kentucky, figure things out. And he says, do you have any computer skills? And we're talking 1995. So at that time, I had, which is laughable today, what might be considered computer skills. And so they paired me with the bookkeeper, and I got to learn the office side of things. And I did that for a handful of months, payables and receivables and payroll. And then they actually did get shorthanded in the field, and we all know how that goes. They scooped me up for the field, and the rest is history.
I hear you, man. So at that point, so you decided to go. You're in Lexington, Kentucky. Is that where you're from originally?
It is, yeah. And I worked for the Mad Hatter down there for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And then my dad had a heart attack, and he was up here. Well, I'm originally from South Alabama by the coast, but we moved so much growing up. It's I claim Kentucky as my hometown. But Dad had a heart attack, and I was afraid I wouldn't have more time with him, so I moved up back to Lexington to be close to Dad, and went back to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I started Barnhill Chimney to pay the bills, to put myself through school. I originally named it Arrow Chimney after my dog, who rode with me to every job the first, decade that I ran the company.
Gotcha. Well, you said you were from Southern Alabama, but I'm gonna tell you something. Start telling people you're from LA. And when they say LA, and say, yeah, Lower Alabama. I know a guy that does public speaking, and he does that all the time. Tells people he's from LA, and he says that's Lower Alabama for you people that are not from the South.
And they claim that down there. The family farm is 3 miles from the Florida line.
I hear you, brother. So you spent some time down on the Redneck Riviera growing up, probably, didn't you?
I mean, back before it was cool.
Yeah. Redneck, for those folks that don't know, that's the Gulf Coast, and that's like spring break if you live in Alabama, Tennessee. What's that beach down there? Palm Beach, or what's the beach y'all got down there?
Orange Beach.
Where?
Orange Beach.
Orange Beach, okay. Yeah. But I know Cheryl and I were down there one time, and it was spring break, and we never seen so many kids pulled out of cars by policemen with handcuffs on them and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you went back, and then you opened up a chimney service business. And that day we didn't call it chimney services. We were chimney sweep business back in those days. So you opened up in Lexington. So that was your first venture of entrepreneurship whenever you opened up the chimney sweep business. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. And at that time, I did not intend on making a career at it.
Really?
I was going to do something that Mama would be proud of at the time. And they were okay with me, chimney sweeping to get myself through school. They thought it was, it was good of me to earn my own way through. And I was studying business and science classes, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And one day I was just done with a few sweeps. It was October, and I really just had a phenomenal day. And I'm thinking to myself, this is what I want to do. And I didn't know if I could really make a solid go of it, but that was in that moment. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Just, this is the thing. And this is, it might not be what Mama wanted, but
yeah,
this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So when you went back to Lexington, you started this business from scratch, or did you buy an existing business when you got back to Lexington?
No, I just hung a shingle, so to speak. I took out an enormous ad in the Yellow Pages back when that meant anything,
right?
And prayed for the phone to ring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And then the phone did ring, and I was making a solid go of it, and that was Arrow Chimney Company. But everybody kept saying, "Call that Barnhill kid," and I finally just got tired of arguing against folks that it was Arrow Chimney Company. I don't know, call that Barnhill kid.
Yeah.
So,
well, Brian, I'll tell you something. Back about that length of time, I think you decided to go to a seminar that I was teaching back then. because there's a friend of yours there in that area. His name's Jeff Gitlin. It was a retired chimney sweep. And Jeff called me and said, hey, this guy is coming down to your class, so I want you to make sure you do as best you can for him to help him out as much. That was probably 95, 96, 97. Do you remember that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say that, it was Jeff retired, and he called me up and he said, hey, would you like to buy my customer list? And I jumped at the opportunity. And Jeff had the best customers. Mm-hmm. He had them trained. They knew what to do. They did whatever you asked them to do. And he ran a really solid business. And the best thing that I got out of that was a mentorship with Jeff. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be where I am today without him.
Right. And Jeff, listen, the town that Jeff lived in, I can still remember, it's called Nonsuch, Kentucky. Because actually, when I would drive up, I believe it's Interstate 75 going through, I can remember looking on the map because I knew he was near Lexington, but where in the world is Nonsuch, Kentucky?
It's nowhere.
Yeah. But, that was back, we used to have a magazine, and there was a lady that published it there that he was her technical advisor. Her name was Jay Hensley. She's passed away some years ago, but Snooze Magazine also was based right there might have been at Nonsuch or Lexington or somewhere around there, if I remember correctly. Am I right?
You're right. I met her daughter at a music event one evening many years ago, and she said, what do you do? And I told her I was a chimney sweep, and she said, oh, really? My family has a chimney sweeping magazine. Which is, nobody ever says that when you say I'm a chimney sweep. So right. I remember it.
Yeah. So Cheryl, I've kind of hogged this up. You got any questions for Brian before I keep going?
Imagine that. Okay. Yeah, Brian, I think it's super what you've done. One question I think that I would like to know is, do you begin with the product or do you begin with the service when you're working with your sales?
Well, I definitely had a service business before I had a hearth retail business.
No, I meant now, what do you do? We're moving on. We've got this set up.
Yeah.
I've had several people ask this.
Yeah, and I think I know exactly what you're getting at. And I think it hits to a root of what Jerry started out talking about with having folks say, I'm going to add this on, right? Mm-hmm. And so it begs some of the major pitfalls that I ran into when I started out. And that is that I had this idea, and I think a lot of folks do when they start from the service side and they move into retail, that I'm already doing this. So I'm gonna stand up this store and I'm gonna put some displays in there, and folks are gonna come like a field of dreams and say, give me that fireplace. And I'm just gonna be able to add that into what I'm already doing, and it's gonna be cherries on top, gravy on the mashed potatoes.
And that's what I did.
Yeah, and so I went full bore into that plan, and it was a whole different experience than I planned on getting into. And I really I struggled at it, to be honest. The first client that I had in the hearth retail business that, turned on the neon open sign, "We're here world." And the first client that I had, I think, illustrates better than anything how retail is different than service. Lady walks in the door. She's an older lady, elderly really. And she says, hi, I hope you can help me. I've driven here from Eastern Kentucky 2 hours away. Right. And I said, absolutely. It's my first client. I'm excited to help her. And she says, she's got a little piece of newspaper clipping with her. And she says, I've got a wood pile and I want to keep the bugs off of it. And I said, okay, tell me more. And she said, apparently you can wrap hemp rope around a wood pile and the bugs will crawl across it. And it, because of the coarse fibers of the hemp rope, it will damage their exoskeleton. and kill them, and the bugs can't enter into your home. And I said, honest, I've never heard of that. And we don't carry hemp rope. And she was so disheartened. She's driven 2 hours to solve this bug problem. And here I am breaking her heart. And I said, listen, we'll figure this out. So I went to Google and I found the hemp rope. And my first sale in the fireplace store was a roll of hemp rope that I bought online and mailed to her home so she didn't have to drive back to us. But I was over an hour. That took me an hour. I told that in 3 minutes, but it took me an hour with her. Yep. And when you have an open sign, you don't know who's going to walk in. And I think that and I could tell story after story, but what I learned was that the hearth retail business, it wasn't this add-on piece. It wasn't this like, oh, put up the displays and they're going to show up and I'm going to have this other income source, this other sales stream that I didn't have before, that I didn't have to devote more time, energy, attention, resources to. And the truth for us has been that, it can be a valuable resource for you, but we had to devote time, energy, attention, resources to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a funny thing when you said that about hemp and you were talking about your origins with hemp rope. Brian, there's a lot of people had an origin with another form of hemp many years ago in our younger lives. Okay. So when you're talking about hemp, that was the first thought that come into my mind is like, okay, I can remember hemp. It probably influenced a lot of people for their first thing. Yeah. So you just came to this conclusion one day that you wanted to go into the retail environment. So you built a very successful business. What do you think is Brian's secret to building this successful business when you've got the service business pulling at you also?
Say that question again, Jerry.
Okay, so you're going into this, and what was the major steps that you took to be successful in the retail business? Because you were successful in the service business, but like we both know, the retail customer and the service customer are not really the same type of customer to deal with. So what's some of the things that you found that make you successful in retail?
There was a quote by Henry Ford, and it says, when you find you need a resource and don't get it, you'll find you've paid for it and don't have it. When you find you need a resource and don't get it, you'll find you've paid for it and don't have it. Mm-hmm. And so what that's really been a valuable quote to me to utilize is, when is the right time to bring a resource in? How do you scale, right? How did you make the retail business work, right? Yeah. So I propped it up, but it didn't have life. It wasn't existing on its own. It was sucking our resources. It was pulling my time, energy, and attention away from our core business focus, which slowed and stymied my growth on the service side. It pulled my attention away from my core focus. And so what I did to get through that was I reached beyond myself. Like you said, when we went to visit you, and I'm so glad that Jeff sent me, because that was actually, Jerry, one of the first times that I ventured outside of my own little sphere to realize that there was this bigger thing out in the world where chimney guys were networking with each other. Yeah. And so I networked my way out of the hole is what I did. I had a relationship with Alan Newkirk from Total Hearth. And he was a really valuable resource to teach me. And he put me in touch with other hearth retailers. Clay Dennis with Southern Hearth and Patio out of Chattanooga. And his own advisors and himself. He actually took me on. So he had different sales folks throughout the region, but he took me on as his personal client. And so he was an invaluable resource.
You're talking about Alan. Alan was a great guy. I don't know if you know it. Alan is an entrepreneur of the top level. He started his Stove Parts Unlimited, and then he became Total Hearth. I don't know if you know or not, Alan used to be a sales rep for Appalachian Stove back many years ago. And then He actually, him and Appalachian separated, and Ken Warren, a friend of mine, took Alan all the way back to Lexington, Kentucky, got him home that day when everything was turning sour, and they actually talked out that business driving from Asheville up to Lexington, Kentucky. But yeah, Alan's a really neat guy. I've known him for many, many years. So Cheryl, what's your next question?
Well, I mean, I look at this as a statement and you can finish it off as a question. I look at people that try to pull this off, and like you say, it sucks so much out of them. What gave you, unlike a lot of other people I've seen, what gave you that extra drive to keep striving instead of just say, I'm out of it and backing down?
I mean, that's a really good question, Cheryl. And I think that I think I had enough success and enough of that not wanting to fail in me that it kept going. I think that one of the things that I feel like is so often not really talked about is the role of absolute dumb luck in people arriving where they are, and I feel like sometimes, here I was 3 years into a college degree of I don't know what I want to do. And I got in a chimney truck with my dog and I said, I want to do something different. And one thing led to another. And it's like if I got into a canoe with my dog and we're going down the river and all of a sudden it turns into the rapids and we're holding on, and then it goes over a waterfall and we're holding on. And then, 10 miles down and there's the press and they're like, how did you make it here, Brian? You're an amazing, canoe guy. You flipped and you rolled and here you are. And I'm like, I held on, So I think that a big part of it was just survival and hanging on and the next thing and the next thing, Yeah.
So Brian, let me ask you this. When I ran my business like you did, I had two different brands, one for my retail and one for my chimney service. The chimney service was the Chimney Doctor Incorporated. On the retail side, we were the Fireplace Patio and Grill. Now, do you market yours under one common brand, or is there two brands there with different websites and all that? Or is it all combined as one on your marketing side?
It's all combined as one.
So everything is Barnhill as far as, so if when they call, is the same phone number working are you calling the same phone number to get either business?
That's right.
Okay. So that's the way so that works for you very well at doing that. So you have one website serving a dual purpose here.
That's right. And just recently we moved the store into a more visible location, and an interesting story about why we did that is I was listening to a neuroscientist talk about the architecture of our minds and how the geography of our minds places information. And she said, it's called place and face. And she said, before we had language to be able to communicate, we were still evolving, but we knew how to find ourselves in space. So we would be able to navigate. And that part of the architecture of our brains is place. And then we also knew how to recognize each other by our faces before we had language. So we could still grunt and communicate and hand signals. So the architecture of our brains devoted a lot of room for places and faces. And so it was that concept that led me to think, the way we navigate in our communities is so much not a grid-like system. We say, oh, you turn left at the old oak and then you get to the bank and you turn right. And I thought if we had a location that was a monument style building, that folks would really begin to know us and learn about us from that. And that's what we've done most recently. And it's been really valuable.
Yeah. So Cheryl, next question's yours.
Basically, I think you've marveled most people in what you're doing, and actually the fact that you have them combined is another marvel, because most people cannot. It's kind of like taking twins and trying to make two out or one out of them, and you seem to have done it. Why do you think you did, And other people have so much trouble being able to hold them together and have to become two different entities as, we did back in the past.
I think I can hit on that. And it was that when you find you need a resource and don't buy it, you'll find you've paid for it and don't have it. And that was when I realized that I wasn't capable of doing it. I wasn't capable of running the service business and the store and keeping it all glued together. And I reached out and actually hired my first operations guy, Ryan Ball, who had a background in hearth retail, and then we also hired another guy, Matt Reed, who was a referral from Alan Newkirk, and so I've got these two phenomenal folks that are running this enterprise. And so I've got this brain trust, and that it's one where I recognized at a certain point, way too late actually, that I needed this resource, and I'd already paid for it, but I at least realized at some point that I needed to branch out.
Right. So you've got a manager of the retail side, and you have a manager of the service side. Am I reading you correctly?
We've got it carved out a little different, but I think that the thing that really has been the most valuable to us in the last couple of years was a business operating system called EOS.
I'm very familiar. Book of Traction, Mr. Wickman. Yes, sir. I'm a firm believer of Mr. Wickman's principles.
Yeah, me too. And Hope Stevenson gave me the book at a mixed group meeting 6 years ago, and I stuffed it. There it is. Yeah. I stuffed this book that she gave me in my glove box 6 years ago, and when I sold the truck, it was still in there during the pandemic, and I pulled it out and I read it, and I hired an implementer. And so when you said, who runs the retail store, what we have, we've implemented EOS. So we have an org chart that they call an accountability chart that flows. It's a system of management communication throughout the entire business.
Right. Well, one of the principles of EOS is there's two different personalities. One is the visionary. The other is what they call the integrator. And to be honest with you, I call it the implementer. Okay. That's just my way of saying it, because every client I work with, this is one of the books I always recommend is Traction. And this is Grip, which is another book by Mr. Wickman also. But anyway, but where you've got that. So we have the visionary, and we have what they would call the integrator in Traction, which I would call the implementer. Which one are you? Are you the visionary, or are you the integrator?
I'm the guy that thinks of crazy stuff. I love EOS, but one of the things that I have a super hard time with is the term visionary. I feel like it's so high-handed, but that's the box that they try to keep me in.
Right. Well, see, the whole thing is, if you actually read that, and if you've read the book, visionaries have a low level of patience to get stuff done. Visionaries wake up in the middle of the night with great ideas, and somebody's got to tell the visionary, you really need to just roll over and go back to sleep on that one. We're not ready for that one. But it is. That's, between that and the E-Myth and my coaching practice, that's two of the basics that we work with right there of the systemize and stuff. But when I heard the Traction stuff, it was very unreal of where it went to there. So Cheryl, you got another question? Because I got plenty on my end.
What I've seen here is you, as a young man, and compared to me and Jerry, you are a young man. You have taken to heart the systems. You've taken to heart the learning, and we threw in the dumb luck with it, and it amazes me that someone your age is willing to go into that depth. It's more of a statement than a question.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I appreciate you saying so. I think that I've lived up to my mother's admonishments that I'm hard-headed. And I beat my head against the wall hard enough that I was forced into making those decisions, maybe earlier on than some would have, just from pain.
And that's how we learn. You don't
Yeah.
train without the pain. And Jerry's an advocate of that. You learn from pain.
That's
But
it.
I did want a lot, and I'll kick in with another question when we hit the spot that I need. I'll just break in, Jerry, if that's okay.
Sounds good. So, Brian, one of the things is, and there's a couple of questions I've got here on networking. And I don't know if I even told you this when I contacted you, but I had this idea of doing today's interview. And I don't know if I shared this with you, but I had you in my mind. But I called somebody, his name's Tim Reed, and I said, Tim, I'm looking for someone that has an exceptional retail and service business. Who would you tell me to call for this interview? And guess who he told me? You. Okay. You're the one that he told me about to look up. And like I said, I've known you for years from way, way back and always watched from the distance. But I want to go a little further. In fact, a person's on here that's just spoke up here named Debbie Weedwald, I think is a really good friend of both of ours up in Columbus, which actually brings me to the next question. I don't know if you know it, but you were in a mixed group, which is a management information exchange group at one time. And did you know I was one of the original members of that group, Brian?
I did.
And do you know why I dropped out of that group into it? I'm going to tell you exactly. There was a couple reasons, but one of them was these guys were mainly in the sweet business. And was Jack Pixley still living and a member of that group when you got into it?
No, he wasn't.
Okay. So anyway, we had the mixed group in our showroom. And he was and we had a lot of patio furniture. And this was the comment out of Jack's mouth. Jerry, there's no need on God's green earth why anybody needs this much inventory, because we're in the dating orders. We were a Travis dealer. We were buying heavy inventories and patio furniture, gas logs. I mean, we had a really massive inventory there. So was the mixed group, was that helpful to you in developing your retail end, or was that more on the service end when you were in the mixed group? Because I believe you have dropped out of it now also.
Yeah, that's right. The peer group was really valuable for me on a lot of levels, not the least of which is just, the camaraderie, the brain trust, that you're not alone, that came out of it. The book Traction ended up in my glove box because of that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see, Mark Rizzo's successful hearth store in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't so much from a nuts and bolts of running a hearth retail business as it was just more on the business side.
Okay.
And what came from, just, how that goes, networking with other professionals. Like there's somebody that's figured it out. And in that group, there was a lot of folks that had figured it out, a lot of different things, So it was a fantastic group.
Yeah. So recently, didn't you have Tim come and work at your place? Didn't he come in and work with you guys?
Absolutely. So when we set up the first retail shop, it was almost like a farmer getting a good crop, and then he builds on an addition to his house.
Yeah.
There's 4 different little offshoots. And so our hearth retail store that I originally built in the other building was not a thought through process. It was, it was a sort of a nightmare for the retail guys to try to walk a client. Let me take you over here. And okay, now let's go back over here. Right. And so, our implementer, Matt Reed, actually, same last name, and Ryan Ball, our ops guy, had met Tim Reed at a show, an HPBA show, and listened to his podcast. And so they said, hey, let's reach out to this guy and have him come in and help us set up the new store and consult with us. And so we did, and he actually helped us lay out this fireplace store.
Mm-hmm. So he was involved in the design of the present store you're in right now.
Absolutely, and that was really valuable. But the even more valuable than that was he really helped us with sales process in relationship to hearth retail sales.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that I really just am ashamed to say how poorly I did at. I wasn't tracking door swings. He says, here I am on the service side. I've got Service Titan. I've got all the sophisticated tracking. Somebody walks in the store, they were in my way. Not really, but that we weren't tracking them. We weren't following up with them. They weren't getting the same level of service that somebody on my service side did. And Tim really helped us to develop systems around that, and it's really ramped up a lot since his help.
Yeah, Tim and I do a lot of referrals back and forth. We've done each other's podcast and all that kind of stuff. And Tim's a really neat guy. A lot of times I tell him, I don't know how you keeping all the hats in them. But he also used to be a rock and roll singer. But I heard him singing one day. It's like, hey, you need to stay into this. You're not intended.
Oh, come on. He was good.
So, Cheryl, you haven't butted in. You got something out there, sweetie?
Well, this kid just amazes me. It really does, because I've seen so many try and fail. And like you say, the mixed group helped you. What are some other avenues that you think got you to where you were at? We had the mixed group. We had Alan with Jerry's help. What are some of the other avenues that if people would want to follow in your steps, where would you suggest?
I started having challenges with cash flow, especially around the hearth retail piece, because as Jerry brought up, all that inventory. Well, I was running a just-in-time chimney sweep business. You need a cap, you build a cap. You need to go and build a chimney. The brickyard is literally on the street that our shop is on. We pick them up on the way, right? And so it was a cash-based system, and I could see it all, right? And when we grew to, it was seven or eight trucks, and I really was struggling to keep it all in my head. I was able to keep it all in my head up to a point. Have you guys ever heard about the M&M vibrating plate experiment? So that it's used to illustrate capacity and organizational systems. So they take a little vibrating plate, they dump a bag of M&Ms on it, and your job is to separate out all the colors. Well, so it's vibrating and they're mixing and they're trying to intermix, and you keep them all separate, right? Well, now you've got them all separate and you're keeping them separate, and they're trying to intermingle again, and then they dump another bag in on them. And I imagine like every bag of M&Ms is like another truck in the chimney business. Yeah. And it reached a point where, try as I might, I couldn't keep everything from intermingling. I was not able to keep my M&Ms separate. And that happened on like an organizational side where we talked about EOS. But it really happened in the sophistication around the controls around our finances. And in the inventory piece being chief among them. And I reached out to a guy here in town, a CFO, and he really has been instrumental in helping us get things to where we have a better sense of that cash flow.
Right. So you have a CFO locally that works with you, and so people understand CFOs help you to plan for the future. Accountants help you track the past. But then your CFO's incremental for helping you to plan where you're going to. Would you agree with that assessment?
I would. And the fellow's name that I use here in town is Tim Guthrie, and he's been just fantastic for me. And I think that one of the most valuable things about that relationship is that it's somebody from my hometown. And it's somebody that I can have a personal relationship with. He's a friend of mine. When we were one of the 5 top heat shield dealers, and we got to go to the Indianapolis race. There's 5 dealers that got to go, and I kidnapped him and took him with me, because he was however much per hour, and I got him for like all the hours there and all the hours back for free,
There you go. That's kind of, who Tommy Mello is?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Tommy's a really good friend of mine. We talk a lot and all that, but that's why he invites all these guests on his podcast. He said, Jerry, this is free coaching. I get people like Michael Gerber and other people like this to come on to my podcast. And then I'm getting their services for free. So you did a really good thing. You just stuck him in the car all the way to Indianapolis with you, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
do you have two separate budgets? One for the retail side, one for the service side?
Our budget does encapsulate some aspects of the retail business, but it's not as granular as, like the Hearth Retail Associates are included in the macro budget, but there's not a side marketing budget for Hearth Retail.
Okay, so some of it is intermingled. It's like I had one client one time. He actually kept two inventories. He had even the flex pipe. If he was buying relining pipe, he had inventory for the retail side and one side the warehouse, and for the service company, it was over here. So this belonged to the retail. This belonged to that company over there. It was he had actually set up two corporations in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting thing. I had another client one time call me back. It's like 1995. He called me up. I was for Cheryl and I even got together and I was home. He called me up. He said, Jerry, he said, I want to go into retail business. And I said, tell me why. And he told me why he wanted to sell this and that. I said, well, okay, but you want to be aware of this, this, and this. And then about 25 years later, he called, he was a client and he said, Jerry, I want to close the retail. I'm tired of it. And here was what his thought process was. He said he just got so tired of people just could walk into his store at any time and disturb everything. And in the service business, you don't have that. We don't have consumers necessarily come in that. Do you feel that way sometimes that the customer can be disruptive to your life in the retail side?
100%. And really, Tim Reed helped us change that.
Okay.
We had my sales associates also answered the phone. So they were helping book jobs, and they had other aspects of the workflow of the service company. And when he and Grant Falco came in and they did a deep dive with us for 2 days, and when we came out of that, it became just, there was egg on my face, really. Some of the things that were just so incredibly obvious that we weren't doing right. And that was one of them, is we didn't value that client. I wouldn't have my service tech driving out to do a sweep call and have him on a VYP trying to schedule a job for me. Why is that? Because I want him to focus on that client, right? I want him to do the very best job for them so that we can have the best value for us and for them. And yet here I am, I'm having my Hearth Retail Associates, they weren't incentivized properly. They were, their roles and responsibilities weren't carved out for them to be successful. And when we changed that and gave them a plan to be successful, man, the very same folks really took off.
Okay, great. Cheryl, another question?
Okay, we're going to speculate future. Okay. Have you put much thought, as we all need to be doing early on, into your exit plan with having basically 3 businesses married together? Have you speculated on an exit plan?
I've ruminated on it. I don't have one, but I definitely have thought about, like, what does that look like, and what are those next steps? And really, EOS has given me the ability to even look up and say, what would that look like now? A business that's running well enough that I'm not being called in at every moment has those opportunities for you to think about, like, what those next steps are. So to be fair, Cheryl, I don't have an exit strategy yet. I am having a lot of fun though.
Hey, that's the main thing. And like I said, but keep in mind, we're up in 70s and you're not, so you will be here one day. So that does creep up on you, brother. You just got to be aware of that. Yeah. So what about your product mix, Brian? Is it just Hearth? Are you selling grills? Do you sell other products besides hearth products?
I think the story around grills is a really good story about how I'm a visionary personality type, and also how you can have go after something that you're not ready for. So I designed a barbecue grill fireplace that I named the Firewall Grill. It was my shiny rabbit that I like to chase. And I got it on national TV 5 times, 5 or 6 years ago. It was a fireplace grill, so you could go from grilling to chilling in seconds. It was a vertical stack so that the hot air rises, takes the smoke with it. So you could cook on this thing, stand right in front of it. It wouldn't smoke you out. It was a dream. Had an open coal bed with a tool that you use to move the coals around that we call it a bladernator, so that you could adjust your heat instantly, just like you would for cooking on a gas stove. And I had so much fun with that thing, and I traveled all over the country promoting it. And I'd be the first one to tell you, Jerry, I had no business doing that. I had no marketing plan, really. I had no manufacturing capacity. I was building these things by hands on handbrakes. And folks started seeing that thing, and I was getting calls from Japan, South Africa. I've installed these things all over the country. I made less than $0 and spent a lot of time and energy on it. And so that was my foray into barbecue grills. And so right now I've backed away from all of that, focusing on our core business. On the manufacturing side, we build chimney caps, and we have amazing delivery times. We get them to folks really quickly, and it's a very well-built product. And that's our core focus. No barbecue grills. And on the hearth side, it's fireplaces, and we do that right.
Yeah. What's your mix there as far as gas, wood, pellet? What's your percentage breakdown at this point?
Yeah. Well, surprisingly, it's moved from wood to where when we moved here on Winchester Road and have a dedicated focus, it's mostly gas.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I want to point out here, actually, when you opened this, there was a very nice retail store there in Lexington. It actually had been featured on the cover of Hearth and Home magazine. It was actually the month right before ours was featured, back around 05, 04. But did that scare you at all, that there was a really high-end shop there in town, or did that excite you to have that there?
Well, when you look at the statistics about the number of homes that we're all actually in, and that gives me some hope that there was room in there for me to be part of the conversation as well.
Yeah.
But whatever that thing is that makes you not leap, I don't have as much of that gene, so that wasn't my problem.
Gotcha. So Cheryl, what else you got? We got about time for one more question. You got a good one?
I'm just in awe. I'm gonna pass on my turn because I know you're sitting there with some.
Okay. So Brian, let's say that there is an enterprising young Brian, and I mean someone with your thought process out there, and they're listening to this. And he's kind of like you. He may have started up a chimney sweep business. He may even be out sweeping chimneys with his dog or his cat right now. Mm-hmm. But this guy or this gal is coming along, and they're starting to get serious, and they're thinking, and okay, I'm thinking about adding a retail showroom. I got about 4 or 5 trucks running now, and I think retail is my next avenue to go into. And if they called you, what would be the things you would tell them to guide them?
Yeah, I would say come visit our store. Go visit stores near you. Talk to the owners. Really examine if that's the next step for you and why. Is that a move that you're making because the fact that you feel like it's something that you're ready for, that you're going to be able to devote time, energy, resource, attention to get what you want out of it? Is it something that you want to do, but maybe it's a few years down the road and you got to learn to pick to the stick to get there so that you're able to manage it successfully? And then I would also say that that it'd be a good idea to call some of these folks that that consult on doing exactly that and ask their advice. Because just like with EOS, I knew that I wasn't the guy that was going to hold my team accountable to the implementation of that business process, and it was expensive. But we hired a really fantastic implementer, John Fox, and we implement because of having his help. So I'd say that network as much as you can so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did.
Well, failure is a pretty expensive tuition to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's what you've got to look at. I mean, like I said, this is what I do. It's what Tim does. There's good people out there that can help you, but you got to reach out. And I like exactly what you said, because it's what I tell people. Get out, go visit some retail operations, go see what's happening out there. Go talk to reps in the business and what's successful, what's happening in that market area, what you got to do to be successful. So is there anything else you would share before we end this today, Brian?
No, I don't think there is, but I've really enjoyed talking with you both. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it has been. Like I said, as I go through this, actually, I thought about when Jeff had told you that you were coming to that seminar, and he called me about it. It's like, a lot of us older, well, I'm just going to say it this way. A lot of us older guys out here like myself, Jeff, another person that I know you talked to, Victor M. Garden, you and Victor have had some conversation. I don't know. Did that come? Did you go to Chimney Sweep School to get that relationship with Victor that you have? Is that where that came from?
I met Victor at a heat shield summit. I'm pretty sure it was a heat shield summit. No, it was a Lindemann U that was in Southern Florida is where we met.
That's where you met him at.
Yeah.
Okay, I started to say you might have been at a Grateful Dead concert, because
I love Victor.
That's one of his places. Well, brother, I appreciate the wisdom you shared. I sincerely congratulate you. I watch a lot of people around the country, and I watch what's happening out there. And when I look for somebody that could be a great guy that's built this the way you have and gone forward, and I've seen, you building your manufacturing. I actually remember that grill fireplace deal you had. I remember when you came out, it's kind of, when you said that story, I was going to tell you, hey, you need to come to Concord and walk through her warehouse and see the tens of thousands of dollars and even hundreds of thousands of dollars of some of my bright ideas in the middle of the night. And I would just walk out there in the shop and you see her shaking my head. I had a guy that could build anything, Brian. So we would actually just go draw it out on paper, say, hey, we need this. We've started developing biofuel burners and all kinds of stuff. It's just these bright ideas you got out there,
So we have more white elephants than any other entity that I know of.
I'm sure he knows exactly what's going on, but it's a lot there, and that's what you're doing. So, brother, hey, I appreciate you being with us today. It's been a sincere pleasure. And sometime we come through Lex, I'm gonna stop and see you, catch you. I remember one time I was coming through and you were gone. I should have called you before I come to town, but next time I'm gonna yell at you before I get there and say, hey, I'm coming through. We're gonna have lunch today. How's that work?
You got to do it. We have what's been rated the #1 barbecue restaurant in the country is right next to my neighborhood.
Wait a minute. #1 barbecue in Kentucky?
No, in the country.
That's what I mean, but it's located in Lexington, Kentucky. Come on, Brian.
He'll be there next week.
Well,
okay.
You'll put it to the test, Gary.
I will put it to the test. You got it, brother. Anyway, appreciate you joining us very much so. And this has been the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. This is sponsored by CB6 Success Group. And what our mission is, our purpose, what we do this show all about is to help people just like you to help you get to those business dreams. So if you need some assistance, listen to what Brian did. Give someone like us. It may not be us. It may be Tim Reed. It could be anybody that can help you get to your business dreams. And with that, we'll see you next week on another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace